Hello, my name is Michael Tillotson and I am an author. Today we're going to talk about a charming little game called Slay the Princess. This video will contain spoilers for some of the routes in Slay the Princess, including the best one, so bear that in mind before watching. Slay the Princess is a game that I am very surprised I wound up playing. See, I usually cannot handle gore and the like, and Slay the Princess was not exactly what you'd call a gore-light game. It was right on the cusp of what I could handle, and there were some scenes I actually couldn't handle and had to look away. For a lot of games or movies or TV shows, once I started to see it becomes as gory as Slay the Princess did, I would have put it down. But Slay the Princess had its hooks in me. Yes, like that time with the floor made of chains. I couldn't put the game down, and the reason is because I think it explored a really interesting theme, intentionally or otherwise, that I don't think I've seen explored very often. A lot of media tends to focus on this idea of us shaping who we are. We have to find our own path and become our own person, as though we live in a vacuum and who we become is entirely within our control. But that is a load of hogwash. Who we are and who we become is a lot less in our control than I think most people want to believe. We're shaped by our experiences, the way people treat us, the kinds of things that happen to us, where we live, who we grew up with. All of these things determine who we are, and most of them are entirely out of our control, and especially when it feels like we got the short end of the stick, that can be a really tough thing to come to grips with. A lot of media takes a very hopeful stance on this topic. Believe in yourself and you can do anything and all that nonsense. And this is fine. I like me a cutesy happy story, but I think it's also important for more stories to acknowledge this idea that who we become isn't really up to us, and that the world shapes us into who and what we are. And that brings us to Slay the Princess. So, the premise of Slay the Princess is fairly simple. You are on a path in the woods, and at the end of that path is a cabin, and inside that cabin is a princess. You are here to slay her. If you don't, then it will be the end of the world. Which, side note, if you haven't played the game, if that premise sounds interesting and you can handle moderate gore, then you should stop watching and go play it, because from here we're going to start getting into spoilers. That was basically all I knew about Slay the Princess going in. Well, that and the approximate level of gore the game had. Someone was nice enough to tell me about that bit. So I approached the cabin, went inside, picked up the knife, and entered the basement. There, the princess was in chains, but I decided to talk to her first. I had kind of already made up my mind. I knew I was going to kill her. You might be wondering why, and I'll get to that later, but as I went to kill her, it turned out she had a knife too, and she killed me instead. And then I was on a path in the woods, and at the end of that path was a cabin, and in that cabin was a princess, and I was here to slay her. This time when I got there, though, the basement was different. I was now in a hallway, and the princess stood at the end with her hands behind her back. Obviously, she had a knife. I tried to talk her down, since she clearly posed herself to be a threat, but she got bored, and blades shot out of her hand as she rushed me down. We fought over and over again, and she soon became a monster of metal and blood. But eventually, after countless battles, I had finally won. And then, I was on a path in the woods. And at the end of that path was a cabin, and in that cabin was a princess, and I was here to slay her. But this time, I didn't. I walked down there, I helped her out of her chains, and she chewed her arm off, happens all the time, and we went outside. And then I was on a path in the woods. This time when I reached the cabin, the princess was wearing a fancy gown. She was gentle and sweet, and unlike last time where she started chewing her arm off, this time there was no dark twist. We get her out of the chains with ease, and she's happy as we walk outside the cabin. And then I was on a path. We're not doing that again, don't worry. This is the idea behind Slay the Princess. You're on a path in the woods, on your way to slay the princess, but then you're hit with a time loop. On any given run of the game, you keep your memory through the loops, but once you reach the end of that run, or path, or whatever you'd like to call it, you truly reset to the beginning with no memory of what happened. The way you treat the princess, though, and the way she treats you shapes you both. The princess's transformations are a lot more visual and noticeable. Sometimes she's a spooky ghost, sometimes she's a delicate princess, sometimes she's a beheaded chain monster, sometimes she's just made out of swords, because why not? On your end, you get extra voices in your head that tend to reflect whatever just happened. The narrator told us she didn't have a knife, and then she did, so we get this super skeptical voice of the cheated joining us along for the ride now. There is an in-universe explanation for why all this is happening, but for the purpose of this video, it's just kind of besides the point. To me, Slay the Princess's big narrative theme is this way how the princess and the players shape one another. You can quickly enter this downward spiral of spite, hate, and violence where the two of you keep hurting each other over and over and over. But there are just as many plot lines where you're helping each other, where you're even nice to each other. But you're still the same people, and what led to these drastically different events was the way you treated each other, starting with the way you treated her. Well, and the lore reason, but ignore the lore for now. We're talking about symbolism. What I like about Slay the Princess's take on this idea is that we can definitely make choices about how we treat the situation, but what ultimately comes out of those choices is often out of our perceived control. Perceived because, this is a visual novel video game, and if you make the same choices, you'll always get the same outcome, but assuming you don't know the outcome in advance, it feels out of your control. This is heightened by the fact that everything in the story is totally exaggerated and blown out of proportion. Nobody's going to turn to a freaky sword monster in real life, no matter how you treat them. Probably. But you can't help but feel responsible for the creation of this freaky sword monster. She became this way because of what you did. But on the flip side, as you start getting all these different voices in your head, it becomes clear that the way she treats you is having just as severe an effect. As you get the voice of the cheated, there's this constant voice in your ear, literally in this case, telling you not to trust the princess no matter what. And in the case where you're playing a video game, this is a pretty easy thing to ignore if you really want to, but as you go through all these different plot lines, you find that a lot of these times these voices aren't just coming from a place of nowhere, They're right a lot of the time, and it doesn't take long where you start trusting them more and more, and sometimes you don't even actually get a choice. You'll try to say no, but this voice in your head takes over and says, yes, we're taking the knife, or something similar. And you can go into one of these cabins with a plan and with an intention, but then you could find one of these voices is actually super convincing, and you change what you were going to do at the last minute, or sometimes the voice literally won't let you make another choice. And while the voices are a lot less literal in the real life equivalent to this, it's not hard to see the symbolism here, where people lose control of themselves because of the way they've been hurt in the past. It's hard to trust the princess when last time she literally stabbed you or something. Our experiences shape who we become, and it's really totally out of our control, If we grew up in a healthy home surrounded by people who love and support us, then chances are we're going to grow up to be a stable, healthy person with a strong relationship to their family and others. But if we grow up in an unstable home with abusive parents or siblings or something, then chances are that abuse that we experience as a child is going to make it harder to form relationships with other people. And unfortunately, we're going to be likely to lash out at some point, and depending on the other person, this could just be the end of it. You've just lost your friend or your partner or whatever because of something that happened years or even decades ago that was totally out of your control in the first place. All of this probably sounds pretty hopeless at this point, but there's another side to Slay the Princess. For all the times things wind up in this downward spiral of hate and spite and pain, not all of them end this way. Basically, everyone's favorite route is the Thorn, and this is the route where you offer to free the princess and then betray her. On the next loop, she is obviously going to betray you in kind, but if you let her kill you, then she'll look at you with a pained expression and ask you, why? Why did you let me do that? And when things loop again, she's deeply conflicted about everything that's happened. You hurt her, she hurt you, but you seem to be trying to make amends, to forgive her for what she's done, and to seek forgiveness for what you've done. The road is shaky and difficult and covered in painful thorns, but As long as you're both willing to try, reconciliation is possible. You can walk out of the cabin together and it's really sweet. I don't remember if I cried when I saw this ending, but I probably did. And it's not the only one like this either. The way we treat other people shapes them, and the way people treat us shapes us. We can hurt each other and end up in this vicious spiral of hate and spite, but that doesn't have to be the end. With a little work, we can work past that pain. People shape each other, but that goes both ways. When we hurt people, we can set deep-rooted, painful beliefs in them, and it turns into a horrible positive feedback loop where the pain caused in the past leads to more pain in the future. But if we reach out our hand and show them that forgiveness is possible, that moving past that pain is possible, then maybe the shape we take can be a beautiful one. For me, this was the core of Slay the Princess. For all the pain that people cause each other, for as much as who we are is outside of our control, there is always a road to forgiveness, as long as it's able to be walked together. Of course, forgiveness is a two-person job, so actually that's out of anyone's control too. Okay, bye.